Howdy, I'm Chris Januszewski, and welcome to the Rebellious Times Podcast. We've got a special edition today. Given what's going on in the world, we're in quite crazy times. We're looking out into the world. We seem to be going through a period of what you might call de-globalization, where we're seeing increased protectionism. You've got the Trump tariffs, and we're seeing what looks to be a shift in the global distribution of power and influence. And so supply chain and logistics is something that has a major impact, is impacted by and has a major impact on many aspects of business and life. And so I'm delighted today to kick off the inaugural episode of the Supply Chain and Logistics series with Chris Jolly. He's the co-founder of Freight Coach and Logistics, and he's also the host of the Freight Coach podcast. So I've got a fellow podcaster. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining me.
Oh, Chris, I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. It's great that I've got a fellow podcaster on here because you can empathize with the whole starting a business, running a podcast, and creating content. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
No, absolutely, man. Yeah, it's going on almost 1,400 episodes at this point, and it's one of those things that the structure and the build out of it all took a lot of time, but now like once you got that proof of concept going, it's almost like a well-oiled machine at this point. So yeah. Brilliant. And I can tell your audio already sounds a lot better than mine. So I know when we spoke last time, you gave me some tips on improving my hardware. And we'll see the evolution of the Rebellious Times podcast over the next few months. No, that's good. I mean, that's why I leave all my original recordings up, Chris, as the studio, the camera, the audio, all of that has improved over the time. That wasn't always this way. And I think it's important for when you're documenting the journey to show that evolution, because I think after maybe you get a little bit of recognition out there, or maybe you got a little bit of success out there in business, people will only, when they come into contact with you for the first time, they don't know that there was a beginning, right? So it's like, I always wanted to have that journey and that story well publicized and documented from that perspective.
Yeah, it's funny because when I did my first episode, which is still the one with the most views, I think it's actually got 76 views. So very proud of that. But I went to meet a friend who's an entrepreneur in Austin, who I used to work with as well. And he said, "Yeah, I watched your podcast." I said, "Oh, great. What did you think?" He said, "Look, man, I think there's some bits you should cut out of that. You look a little nervous. You kind of got your words mixed up here and there." And I sat there having a beer with him, and I thought, shit, maybe I should go and look at it. Then I thought, nah, we'll just leave it out there. And like you say, maybe one day I'll come back and look at it and think, wow, look how you started.
As somebody who's done almost 1,400 episodes, leave it up. All right, leave it up. You're going to want that memory at some point in time, right? Because again, it's not like there is, I personally think, and again, this is just my opinion on this, people don't want polished content anymore. I personally think those days are like done. I think people want raw and real conversations more and more now than ever. And especially because it's like, I mean, I just saw something that like over 50% of the users on social media are bots. So like, are you even talking to a real person at this point, right? So it's like, I think that just humanizes the journey a little bit more, because anybody who's ever done it, right? Like I said, man, like I've done a lot of episodes. I appreciate those early episodes when people are going out there and just trying, right? Because like I was like, when we first met, Chris, I'm 5 years ahead of where you are right now. And that's it. That's the only difference. Like when we got to know each other on our initial call, like there's no difference there except for the 5-year gap in between when I chose to start and when you chose to start.
Yeah, it was incredible. I saw so many comparables when we spoke that time, including, I started the podcast as a means to start conversations with potential execs and CEOs and founders that I could work with for Rebel Commerce Solutions, right? And I think you have a similar stream in your podcast as well. And I've found it to be fantastic at starting those conversations and generating business opportunities. I'm interested to hear your perspective and your own experience there.
So from a business development perspective, to kind of take it back a little bit, when I started my company, when I first went into business for myself, I was doing a sales and operations training consultancy for the transportation industry, because that's where the entirety of my career has been spent. And, at the beginning of COVID, found myself out of a job, but like I chose to resign like the week before COVID became COVID. And like we were talking when we first met, like I was delivering pizzas one night, and I was listening to Gary Vee, at the time. And like the whole point of the podcast was, is if I started a business in 2020, this is what I do. And he was talking about start a podcast. And I'm like, all right. So I went on YouTube and figured it out, right? I call it YouTube University. I spent like 40 hours on there because like I didn't know what a microphone setup was, or a camera angle, or, you know, an audio interface, or an RSS feed. I didn't know what any of that stuff was, right? So I had to teach myself on it. And again, like I was delivering pizzas because I didn't have any money, you know, like I had to pay my bills. And I think that entrepreneur culture today paints this, oh, just go raise a bunch of capital and then you just have it all figured out. That's not a reality for a lot of people. So for those of us out there who bootstrapped our businesses, I still exercise that today, 6 years in. I have a gear in me of just the figure it out gear. You know, like I don't have time to waste because I have limited capital to make my dreams work. But, you know, back to the why I started the podcast is I did it because like I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to meet prospects. And Gary Vee at the time said like, hey, this is going to be the best opportunity because you'll never meet a founder who doesn't want to tell his story. And, you know, I've now since found that out to be true. But like when people don't know who you are when you're first starting out, it's very hard to get their attention. So I just started interviewing my friends in the industry on the show. And, you know, that's where I started with it. But now, you know, it's the largest independent podcast in the transportation industry, you know, and I'm the only independent creator that's out there. A lot of people are under, you know, larger media umbrellas. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. It takes a lot of commitment to stick to that. And I think you said you've done 1,400 episodes, right?
Yeah, 1378 was today.
Wow, brilliant. Well, you know, I guess as I started out doing the podcast, I was very nervous, right? Initially, I didn't want to go on video. I didn't want to go on YouTube. I was thinking of just popping something up on Spotify. And I decided to do it. And then you think, okay, you know, you check your counter on YouTube and you say, oh, wow, I've had 1 view. Oh, I've had 8 views. And then, you know, I'll go on someone else's podcast and think, oh, the 10,000 views on this one. But what you realize is that it doesn't matter what people think of you. It doesn't matter what all of your ex-coworkers on LinkedIn think. That, like, if they don't watch your podcast, they don't really care. Everybody's just thinking about what they're doing, right? The only people I really care what they think about my podcast are my wife and kids. And the reason for that is that with us working from home, you know, it's not like when I was a kid in the family business. I was there every day, seeing my granddad, seeing my dad operating, right? My kids just know I come and sit in a closet. And so my podcast, when they get a bit older, if they're a bit more interested in what the dad knew, what he was an expert in, who he spoke to, they can see me having these conversations with these, you know, fantastic people in all types of different business and tech, and say, okay, right, that's what my dad did. And, you know, they'll also get to absorb some of my perspectives in there as well. So that's one way of looking at it.
No, I agree with that, right? But like, most importantly, they say that you're trying. How many people, I mean, I'm not trying to age either of us here, Chris, but, you know, I would assume we're both in our 40s. How many people do we know that have never tried anything, you know, but they all ironically have opinions on what they think you should be doing. And I just like the way that my brain works with everything, Chris, is if you're theorizing about what you think I should do and you're not actually doing it, I personally don't want to hear your opinion. It just does not resonate with me. I only learn from people who have like done what they're talking about, you know? And that's why it's like, for me, everything you're saying about your podcast and doing this, and again, I don't have it all figured out, but again, like I've been doing that. I felt the exact same way when I was just starting out. All of that stuff goes away though in time, right? Because like after a while, Chris, you realize it's the intent behind the message. That's what people are looking for. They want, like, if your intent is pure and like you just want to add value to others, that's going to come across in your message. And that's all that matters the most, right? Because it's not, I mean, think about it, you know, like, because like what this has all led to in my industry and specifically inside of transportation, like, you know, I think I maybe had 100 downloads in the entire first month that I did my podcast, right? Now it's like I get that in an hour, but that took a long time to get there. Again, it's all in perspective. It's all about when you're just starting out. But think about this, man. Have you ever been in a room where you're speaking on stage and there's 100 people in there?
I haven't. No, I don't.
Like, That's a lot of people in a room if
Yeah.
you've never done it, right? But again,
Yeah.
everybody starts somewhere, and you're going to get more and more comfortable with it. The more episodes you do, the more people you talk to, it's going to get more and more of like it's an instinct. It turns into an instinct, and what you're going to see is in as some, because like I do all the business development for my company. I'm cold calling people every single day. That's helped me in that aspect of my business because I know how to ask better questions now because I interview people every single day. It's just the same thing as I'm prospecting. I'm just interviewing them. So it's like I want to ask the right questions to get them talking.
Absolutely. Let's get into the biz then. You mentioned cold calling, then I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when you said that. The lost art of cold calling. Tell me more about Freight Coach Logistics.
Yeah, so we're a third-party freight broker. We are an intermediary. If you're a shingles manufacturer that's out there, I'm calling and I'm trying to organize the trucks to come in, pick up the freight from your manufacturing facility and deliver it out to your customer's location, whether it's a job site, distribution center, stuff like that. We specialize in open deck and heavy hauls. So we are building materials, construction, new construction, all of that. And that is, and I chose that niche because there is so much opportunity inside of transportation. And I saw this happening probably back in like 2018, where the days of the generalist were starting to go away. Like you can't just call people and say, you're the best at everything. We can do anything. Just give me an opportunity to move your freight. When I first started in the industry, that kind of worked. But, as data, as technology has improved, you got to stand out in the crowd. And I just noticed at that time, like, I got to niche down. I got to get a little bit more granular in my service offering. And that came across in my business development efforts, right? Like this doesn't lead to an immediate yes, but it gets me an at bat. It gets me a follow-up call because I'm calling them. I'm specific about what they manufacture, asking them operational questions like, hey, with that piece of machinery, is it only shipped on a step deck trailer because the height is like 9'3", stuff like that. That's a lot different than going in and just be like, hey, can I quote your freight, So I did that as a way to really stand out in a tough freight market because like no matter what is being said out there on Main Street's tough. Costs are up. Inflation is hitting all of us out there. So goods are more expensive to ship. And then furthermore, we're at, with the transportation industry, it is as simple as supply and demand. Right now, there is a greater supply of trucks than there is demand for freight to be moved. And that is just a soft freight market as a whole. So most of your manufacturers that you're going after out there, they're good right now. They're not looking to add any new providers because they're receiving good service. And it's just my job to go out there and find the people who are, maybe had something happen. And I'm just the first person they think of after, when their needs change.
So what do you think is causing the excess in supply of trucks? Have things changed?
So what initially caused it, Chris, was post-COVID, there was a freight boom. There was so much delay from ports being shut down in China and other countries, and then it caused a mass ordering of inventory that caused a mass supply of freight and not enough trucks. And then a bunch of people bought trucks, got into the industry, they made a bunch of money, and, here we are to that day. But freight volumes dipped a long time ago, but a lot of people are staying in business somehow. I don't know. Maxed out credit cards, maybe not paying their bills. I don't know. I'm not looking at everybody's financials, but based on the consumer credit card debt in the United States, it's the highest it's ever been. So I'm assuming a lot of people are maxing out their credit cards to stay afloat. But that capacity just hasn't left the market yet. So that's why the equilibrium hasn't shifted.
Interesting. And so you specialize in the construction industry, right? Construction, housing. What are you on the flatbeds? You're transporting like the big diggers, and what sort of machine, what sort of hardware?
Yeah, you got to think, like excavators and front loaders and, tractors. And then, we also do building materials like, shingles. We do siding. We will move bricks, precast concrete. And then we also have a customer who manufactures road construction paint. And so, again, we're doing on flatbeds, we're going to job sites, stuff like that. So, pretty much anything that needs to be brought to a actual job site out there, pipe, you name it, like that's kind of our wheelhouse, and that's who we go after.
Got it. How did you end up in this business? What made you choose it?
So I chose, I got into the industry because I just came from a family of truck drivers. Like when my great-grandparents immigrated here from Germany back in the 1930s, they started a trucking company in Iowa. My dad drove. He was an owner-operator, solo operator for about 40 years. And I always wanted to get into the industry, but my dad always told me, I want you to work with your brain, not your back. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to get into sales and transportation. And I just kind of fell into freight brokerage just through a friend of a friend. And I started doing that. And I worked for a really large company they were, I think, 7 years I was there. And I was only doing like food and beverage, right? So think everything that you see on a shelf at a Costco, Kroger, HEB, stuff like that. That's all I was moving for the first 7 years of my career. And I just kind of got bored with it, right? I like new. So the thing that I love the most about open deck, like flatbed, step deck transportation is like the dimensions are always different for the most part. It's always going into a different job site and there's a different point of contact. And what you find in like the CPG side of freight is it's always 20 pallets picking up in Austin, Texas, going to Albuquerque, New Mexico, same pickup time, same delivery time, stuff like that. And it's great for your P&L if you can get that consistent business. But I just for me, I liked the challenge initially of trying something new. But what I fell in love with is there's so many different requirements for an open deck load that it's not the same every time, right? It's not always 20 pallets, 2 load locks, dock to dock. And that's what I love about it. I love the thrill of that, how it's different every single time.
I see. So depending on what truck you've got and what you're carrying, I guess there's a myriad of different rules and requirements as to how to onboard it and lock the items in place. Like it must get pretty complex.
I mean, it can at times, right? But there's a system for everything, Chris. And with a lot of the shippers that we work with out there, it's generally the same commodity. It's just going to a different job site, or it's going to a different DOT yard out there, Department of Transportation yard for a state out there and stuff like that. So that's the difference that I like of it. But after a while, you do enough of the same freight, there's a system behind it, and that's why it's for me, systems are everything in business. You have to get. I was not always like this. Like my business partner is very much like, hey, we got to build systems. I'm more of there's a brick wall. I'm just going to run through it and I'll figure it out after I'm through the wall. But I have since learned that there's certain ways that you should go about doing things, and when you develop processes and systems and procedures, it actually makes your life a lot easier sometimes.
It's totally the same as me with that. I'll just march forward and break things. And I got pulled up for that several times in my career for marching a little too fast, So I think having my own business has really helped me, reel that in, given the fact there's only one of me. I have to do everything. And we've got all this technology now that enables us to automate so much that we couldn't before. So at some point, there's going to be somebody creates the first $1 billion one-person company, right? It's probably not going to be me, but somebody's going to do that through systems and automation.
It's only a matter of time. Like it is. I think that there is going. Oh, I bet in our lifetime, Chris, we see a AI CEO out there that is like a CEO of a publicly traded company. It's bound to happen. I think that at some point in time, it's going to happen. Somebody's going to do that, or there is going to be a company out there with the right tech stack that will probably reach $1 billion a year company with like 1 to 5 people. I could see that happening.
Yeah, wow. And I think OpenAI is already probably planning those things behind closed doors, right?
Very true.
So it's one thing on the whole trucking perspective. So obviously I'm from the UK, and at some point I had an American dream, and luckily on the second attempt I made it to the United States. But I was always captivated by the States from what I saw on TV. It sounds kind of silly, right? But I was watching the A-Team, Dukes of Hazzard, and I was watching Smokey and the Bandit, one of my favorite series of films, right? And Smokey and the Bandit 3 which isn't the one with Burt Reynolds, but it's probably the one I watch the most. It's got the snowman in there, and he's got to transport those cores across state lines. And it just did so much to romanticize that whole job of driving across this, this beautiful country in a big truck, and you've got your trucker friends, and you're honking the horns, and talking about 1020s and things on the CB. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to talk to somebody who's worked in or knows that space well.
It's that's how it was though back in the day, right? Like when I would ride along with my dad over the summers, in between like school when I was growing up. That's how it used to be, right? It was a completely different environment out there. But I look at it is the American truck driver is like the last nomad style job that there is. Like I know there's a large percentage of people who don't want to go to an office. You know what? They don't like to do meetings, and they just want to be by themselves and drive. And again, the job can be lonely at times. It's a tough job mentally, but I look at it is there's a specific personality type out there that thrives in that environment, and it was a very respectable career for a very, very long time. And I look at it is it's one of the few industries that are left that you can make six figures and not have to have a college degree. How many jobs out there, you go to school for 4 years, you start out at $60K a year, and after 8 years in, you might crack six figures, where, the trades and the blue collar jobs that are out there right now, Chris, I personally think that's where the next gold rush is going to be, where skilled labor that comes up, plumbers, electricians, truck drivers, I think that is going to be a fast track to 6+ figures out there, because it's a aging out workforce. And again, it's going to come down to supply and demand. There might only be one electrician when there used to be 5, because this next one is the only one that's left. Everybody else is, 65, 70 years old and retired, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of changes in the workforce. Maybe we can close out. Obviously, you built a business that didn't depend on getting funding from VCs. You bootstrapped it. What would your advice for founders be in this age to, start a business and kind of do it the hard way?
I would ask them, what is their actual goal? Like, what do they want to build? I think entrepreneur culture and internet culture glorifies cap raises and, we got to be the next $1 billion, Silicon Valley startup or whatever that looks like. But like, is that what you want as a founder? I know through this podcast and through my career, I've met some very, very successful founders that own themselves 100%. You'll never see them out. They'll never get any press headlines. They'll never do anything, but they own 100% of themselves. And you got to ask yourself, like, what do you ultimately want? Because again, you're trading something for that capital, no matter what. You're trading equity. Now you're going to have to answer to somebody, right? Because PE, VC, all of them, they don't just give you money and go away. They expect something of you, right? So again, you got to ask yourself, what do you ultimately want? My long-term goal, no matter what, is freedom. I don't want to have to answer to anybody. Yes, I have to answer to my customers and my team and all of that stuff. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, I'm not building a company to have a job. I'm building a company because I want to work for me, and I only want I want it to be on my shoulders, right? Like, I look back at, like, when I was an employee, for example, Chris, I never had a hard time working, but like, I always thought I could do it better. And now I'm in that position to where it's like, to me, it's more important long-term to like be 100% in control of my own destiny than have somebody give away equity and then have somebody chop me up and sell me and then fire me from my dream. I know way more founders who were acquired that after the fact wish they weren't acquired and wish they would have never took on money and wish they would have rather have had it took them 20 years instead of 10. And have them have their babies still. And that's ultimately where my mindset is, right? So it's like, again, everybody to each their own. If you want to go raise capital and you want to dilute your equity in your company down to 2% or whatever, that's your prerogative. I would just rather build a company up that I know that at the end of the day, I never sold my soul for $1. And I got to do what I wanted to do with it. But that also comes with the responsibility of it. If I mess up, it's on my shoulders. I can't blame anybody else. But I love that aspect of entrepreneurship.
Love it. That's the American dream in its purest form. Thanks so much, Chris. If somebody wants to contact you, wants to find out about your businesses, where should they go?
Yeah, you can just email me directly at chris@thefreightcoach.com, or you can just find me on any of the major social media platforms. Just look for The Freight Coach on there. I got the signature. If you're watching this, I got the signature orange polo on and all my headshots. It all looks the same. Just reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to speak with anybody.
Chris Jolly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.